أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين بالقاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, we'll start the Shab Juma program with the recitation of Hadith Qisa followed by Dua Kumail. Tonight, inshallah, we will also be commemorating the Majlis for the Wafat of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam. Along with that, inshallah, we will be also commemorating Eisal-e-Sawab Majlis for Marhuma Razia Razak binte Marhum Akbar Ali Hirji. And inshallah, the upcoming program will be tomorrow night at 8 p.m. There will also be Majlis Azza commemorating the Shahada of the first second Imam Hassan al-Mushtaba alayhi salatu wassalam. And inshallah on Saturday, Majlis will start at 8 p.m. for the Shahada of Imam Ali ibn Musa Raza alayhi salatu wassalam. The two Majalis tomorrow and the day after will be recited by Maulana Syed Safi Haidar from India. Those two Majalis will be inshallah in Urdu. Without further ado, inshallah at this moment, I would request Brother Ghulam Haidar to go ahead and start with the recitation of Hadith Qisa.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. عن فاطمة الزهراء عليها السلام بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله أنها قالت دخل علي أبي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله في بعض الأيام فقال السلام عليك يا فاطمة فقلت عليك السلام قال إني أجد في بدني ضعفا فقلت له أعيذك بالله يا أبتاه من الضعف فقال يا فاطمة ائتيني بالكساء اليماني فغطيني به فأتيته بالكساء اليماني فغطيته به وصرت أنظر إليه وإذا وجهه يتلألأ كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسن عليه السلام قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أماه فقلت عليك السلام يا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي فقال يا أماه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله فقلت نعم إن جدك تحت الكساء فأقبل الحسن نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جداه يا رسول الله أتأذن لي أن أدخل معك تحت الكساء فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوضي قد أذنت لك فدخل معه تحت الكساء فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسين قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أماه فقلت وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي فقال لي يا أماه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله فقلت نعم إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء فدنا الحسين نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جداه السلام عليك يا من اختاره الله أتأذن لي أن أكون معكما تحت الكساء فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا شافع أمتي قد أذنت لك فدخل معهما تحت الكساء فأقبل عند ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن عمي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت نعم ها هو مع ولديك تحت الكساء. فأقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله وأتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء. قال له وعليك السلام يا أخي ويا وسيي وخليفتي وصاحب لوائي قد أذنت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء. قال وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بضعتي قد أذنت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخذ أبي رسول الله بطرفي الكساء وأومأ بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم أنا حرب لمن حاربهم. وسلم لمن سالمهم وعدو لمن عاداهم ومحب لمن أحبهم وإنهم مني وأنا منهم. فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم وأذهم عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. فقال الله عز وجل يا ملائكتي ويا سكان سماواتي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئة ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل يا رب ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. فقال جبرائيل يا رب أتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله نعم قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله العلي الأعلى يقرئك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا منحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئة ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم فهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله عليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله فإنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء فقال لأبي إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. فقال علي لأبي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي عليه السلام إذا والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال أبي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا وفيهم مهموم إلا وفرج الله همه ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. فقال علي عليه السلام إذا والله فزنا وسعدنا وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. شكرا بدعاكم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العسام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توسعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وانزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعزم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عزم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وزهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجنت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فادح من البلاء أقلته وكم من عثار وقيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عزم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد آمالي منعني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك ألا يعجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف الضر والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شد وثاقي يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عزمي يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي يا إلهي وسيدي وربي أتراك معذبي بنارك معنى توحيدك وبعد ما انطوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت أو تمعن من أدنيت أو تشرد من آويت أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك الساجدة وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا وبشكرك مادحا وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنا ما هكذا الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا رب وأنت تعلم ضعفي قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثه يسير بقاؤه قصير مدته فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها أضج وأبكي لأليم العذاب والشدة أم لطول البلاء ومدتي فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع دائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك وهبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآملين ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين يا غاية آمال العارفين يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين ويا إله العالمين أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفتي وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك أم كيف يهرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفا أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقا أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا ربا أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحدك وقضيت به من إخلال معاندك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدأ وتتولت بالأنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أزهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير تنزله أو إحسان تفضله أو بر تنشره أو رزق تبسطه أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تستره يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي يا من بيده ناصيتي يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا وأعمالي عندك مقبولا حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قوي على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في المبادرين واشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة الموقنين وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فارده ومن كادني فكده واجعل لي من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخسهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك وعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك متيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وأقلني أثرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا رب نسبت وجهي وإليك يا رب مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني منايا ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء يا سابغ النعام يا دافع النقام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا اللهم صل على محمد
وعلى آل محمد. أحسنتم جزاكم الله. Thank you very much for that beautiful recitation. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Once again, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, we'll start the Majlis in which we are commemorating the Wafat of Rasul Akram Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, and as well as the Eisal-e-Sawab Majlis for Marhuma Razia Razak. I ask all of you to please recite a Surah Fatiha for Marhuma Razia Razak, as well as all of your marhumin deceased relatives and loved ones. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Inshallah, the majlis will be as follows. We'll have so Salam Marcia recited by our Muhtaram Septet Zakadmi Sahab. Inshallah, following that will be Majlis, and right after the Majlis we will have Noha. So please remain online for all of these programs. Without further ado, I would request Brother Septet Zakadmi for the recitation of So Salam and Marcia.
ایک بابا سے بلند سلوات.
اللہم صلی علی محمد.
کیا مرتبہ سلطان حجازی کا ہے کیا مرتبہ سلطان حجازی کا ہے کیا عز و شرف امام غازی کا ہے سجدے کا نشان دیکھ کر سب کہتے تھے سجدے کا نشان دیکھ کر سب کہتے تھے نیزے پائے سر کسی نمازی کا ہے کیا مرتبہ سلطان حجازی کا ہے کیا عز و شرف نہ بنی ایسی داستاں کوئی نہ بنی ایسی داستان کوئی نہ لٹا ایسا کارواں کوئی نہ بنی ایسی قتل نہیں ہوا پیاسا قتل اب تک نہیں ہوا پیاسا 6 مہینے کا مہمان کوئی نہ بنی ایسی داستان کوئی نہ بچا ہائے روزے عاشوراء نہ بچا ہائے روزے عاشوراء نوجوان کوئی بے زبان کوئی نہ بنی ایسی داستان کوئی صبر شبیر یاد آتا ہے صبر شبیر یاد آتا ہے اپنا مرتا ہے جب جوان کوئی نہ بنی ایسی داستان کوئی بے دیاروں کی بے کفن لاشیں بے دیاروں کی بے کفن لاشیں نہ رہا کوئی نوحہ خاں کوئی نہ بنی ایسی داستان کوئی ایک شبیر پا تھے لاکھ ستم ایک شبیر پا تھے لاکھ ستم ہائے کیا کیا کرے بیان کوئی ہائے کیا کیا کرے بیان کوئی کیسے رخصت ہو شاہ لاشوں سے کیسے رخصت ہوں شالاشوں سے، کوئی ہے دل تو ان میں جان، کوئی بنی ایسی داستان، کوئی زندگی دے رہے ہیں صرف نبی، زندگی دے رہے ہیں صرف نبی، آئے لے عمر جاوداں، کوئی زندگی دے رہے ہیں صرف نبی، آئے لے عمر جاوداں، کوئی نہ بنی ایسی۔ فاتحہ۔ اے مومنو یسرا میں عجب نوحگری ہے، زہرا کے لیے داغ غم بے پدری ہے، لب خشک ہے منہ زرد ہے آنکھوں میں تری ہے، پیغمبر کونین چراغ سحری ہے، پیغمبر کونین چراغ سحری ہے، ہوتے ہیں جدا خیر البشر خیر النساء سے، محبوب خدا چھوٹتے ہیں شیر خدا سے، محبوب خدا چھوٹتے ہیں شیر خدا سے، القصہ کے اسرار اجل کھل گئے دل پر، مسجد میں گئے ذوف کے عالم میں پیمبر، عباس و علی تھامے ہوئے دست مطہر، اور جا کے پڑھا خطبہ آخر سر منبر، اور جا کے پڑھا خطبہ آخر سر منبر، پھر بول کے پہنچا ہو اگر رنج کسی کو، اے مومنو تم عفو کرو اپنے نبی کو، اے مومن تم عفو کرو اپنے نبی کو، گر بعد میرے پہنچے گا زہرا کو کچا، ہزار مرکز سے میری پشت نہیں لگنے کی زنہار، یہ چار بزرگ آل پیمبر ہیں خبر دار، زہرا و حسین و حسن و حیدر کر راز، زہرا و حسین و حسن و حیدر کر را، واجب میرے اصحاب پر ان سب کی ولا ہے، یارو یہی تبلیغ رسالت کا صلہ ہے، یارو یہی تبلیغ رسالت کا صلہ ہے، یارو یہی تبلیغ رسالت کا صلہ ہے پایا ملک الموت نے مولا کا جو فرمان آیا با ادب روبرو وے خسرو دوران حضرت ہوئے امت کے لیے وہی کے خواہ ہاں ہاتف نے کہا لے تیری مشکل ہوئی ہاتف نے کہا لے تیری مشکل ہوئی میں شر کا خدا نے کیا مختار ابھی سے بخشے تیری امت کے گناہ گار ابھی سے بخشے تیری امت کے گناہ گار ابھی سے پھر دست ید اللہ ہمیں زہرا کا دیا ہاتھ فرمایا سلوک سے جو ہوگا ہے میرے ساتھ زہرا سے کہا خدمت حیدر سے داد بے حکم ید اللہ نہ کرنا تو کوئی بات بے حکم ید اللہ نہ کرنا تو کوئی محتاج میرے بھائی کو سرتاج سمجھ نہ ہے در کی کنی زی کو تمہیں راج سمجھ نہ ہے در کی کنیزی کو تمہیں راج سمجھ نہ پھرو کہ کہا اے میرے مظلوم نوا سو لو بیٹھ لو زانو پہ میرے کاندھے پہ چڑھ لو مختار میں امت کا کیے جاتا ہوں تم کو وہ کیجیو جس میں میری امت کا بھلا ہو وہ کیجیو جس میں میری امت کا بھلا ہو شبر سے کہا زہر دغا پیجیو پیارے شبیر سے فرمایا کہ سر دیجیو پیارے شبیر سے فرمایا کہ سر دیجیو پیارے فرمایا فرشتے سے کہ لے قبض کرب جان راہی ہوئے مولا طرف روضہ رضوان پہلے شہ مردان نے سر اپنا کیا اری یا پھر پھاڑے نوا سونے بھی ننھے سے گھرے بان پھر پھاڑے نوا سونے بھی ننھے سے گھرے بان غش میں کہیں زینب کہیں کلثوم پڑی تھی خاتون قیامت پہ قیامت کی گھڑی تھی خاتون قیامت پا قیامت کی گھڑی تھی چلاتی تھی قربان گئی آنکھوں کو کھولو پھر کلمہ کا شعر بیٹی سے بولو جاتے ہو نواسوں سے بغل گیر تو ہو لو پھر پیار سے سر رکھ کے میرے زانو پہ رو لو پھر پیار سے سر رکھ کے میرے زانو پہ سو لو قربان گئی داغ نہ دیتے ہوئے جاؤ فردوس میں زہرا کو بھی لیتے ہوئے جاؤ فردوس میں زہرا کو بھی لیتے ہوئے جاؤ فردوس میں زہرا کو بھی لیتے ہوئے جاؤ اے مومنو یثرب میں
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Thank you very much for that beautiful recitation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase the tawfiqat. Before I begin, there's a request for Surah Fatiha for Marhuma Razia Razak binte Marhum Akbar Ali Hirji. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alayhim ghayril maghdubi 'alayhim waladdallin. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي قصرت عن رؤيته أبصار الناظرين وعجزت عن نعته أوهام الواصفين الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما محمد إلا رسول قد خلت من قبله الرسول أفإن مات أو قتل انقلبتم على أعقابكم ومن ينقلب على عقبيه فلن يضر الله شيئا وسيجزي الله الشاكرين صدق الله العلي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. As it was announced, inshallah, tonight we are commemorating the Wafat of Holy Prophet Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. The verse that I chose for tonight's discussion, inshallah, which will be a practical example from the life of the Holy Prophet, is the ayat from Surah Al-Imran, ayat number 144. While the name of the Holy Prophet has been mentioned in this ayah, we find how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing a very important phenomena, which, of course, this book is forever, it's Javedan, and it does not come with an expiry date. Therefore, all of the laws and the ahkamat that are mentioned in it will remain relevant to us. As in this ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions by saying that Muhammad is but an apostle. Other apostles have passed before him. If he dies or is slain, will you then turn your back on your heels? Anyone who turns their back on his heel will not harm Allah the least. And soon Allah will reward those who are grateful. This ayat, which gives us hope, and there's also fear in it. Fear of the fact that what some may think after the rahalat of the Holy Prophet, after he left the noble Prophet, that they may turn back to their olden days, and they may go back to the time and the period of Jahiliyyah. What is the context of revelation of this ayah? This verse was revealed after Prophet was struck by a stone on his forehead by the Meccans in the battle of Uhud. And of course, when he was struck on the forehead, it started bleeding. And someone shouted that Muhammad is dead. Some people also confused the death of Mus'ab to be the death of Rasulullah. They thought, when they looked at Mus'ab was the one who actually had died, and they mixed it with the Wafat, and they thought it was Rasulullah who died. This brought, of course, joy and excitement to the unbelievers, mushrikeen of Makkah. They were excited after hearing this news. And as the case is, when you hear the news of someone big in a battlefield, someone who's the flag bearer or someone who's the commander in chief. And of course, it brought joy to them. While many weak-hearted Muslims, they ran away from the battlefield after hearing this news. And some resorted to seeking immunity from Abu Sufyan even, who was standing, of course, in the ranks of the enemy. In response to all of this, some Muslims said, even if Prophet was dead, the path of the Prophet and the path of Allah is still there. And of course, Prophet will not leave this world without having appointed his successor. Thus the ayat was revealed. وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُولُ. Do you forget the fact? Now this is hypothetically speaking, that if he was dead, is that how you're going to treat? Is that how you're going to turn back on your heels when you hear the demise of the Prophet, wafat of the Prophet, shahadat of the Prophet? Duty of the Prophet is to propagate the message of Allah. It is us who must continue this path. So therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ. He's, the ayat in the sense that Allah is speaking, and allow me to explain it in this way so we understand it, but without any respect or disrespect rather. That Prophet, that Muhammad is nothing except the Prophet, which is of course a big thing to be a prophet. But that's what the tone of the ayat is, that he's a prophet, he's Rasul, he's a messenger. His duty is to convey the message. You thought that he was God? You thought that he was, everything? So even if he was to leave, you should not turn back on your heels, because we've sent prophets before him and they all left. And so he will also leave one day. This should not be a hard thing for you to understand. But the fact of the matter is, once he does leave, he hasn't left yet. But when he does leave this physical world, then you should not go back to your olden days. So did the previous nations turn away from the religions after the death of their prophets? No. قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ. An Islamic society should have such a formation and solidarity that even after their leader leaves, it does not affect the fabric of the society. The society does not get affected too much by it. Of course, there will be some sort of effect of great leaders when they leave this world. But if in mata aw qutila in qalabtum ala aqabikum, very strong words are being used. Prophet is also bound to the godly tradition and the natural laws of life and death. So this natural life that he lived and that natural death that will come upon him, that is something that he is also bound to as far as the creation and the formation is concerned. Of course, Prophet's physical death should not be taken in a sense that he's gone. Of course, he's the first nur which was created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala way before the creation of Hazrat Adam alayhi salatu. But in the physical form, his wujud came into existence in the year, of course, 570 AD, when in the family of Hazrat Abdullah and Bibi Amna. So that's where his physical wujud is. But of course, the spiritual wujud of the Prophet was always there. So the rumor is a propaganda by the enemy. Mata aw qutila. This is the similar tactic that is used by the media outlets as well. And today, unfortunately, whenever there's a violent attack somewhere in the Western world, and before any sort of investigation, they right away go ahead and blame it on Muslims indiscriminately before investigation begins. Rumor is a propaganda by the enemy. Why? With that rumor, even when it turns out to be a false rumor, because rumors are false, when it turns out to be false, it still planted the seed in the hearts of the people who were listening, who were paying attention. And that's exactly what enemy wanted. So Prophet's worldly life may be limited, but his path is not limited. His worldly life may only be 63 years, but his path does not come, as I said before, with an expiry date. So one must strengthen their faith to an extent that events of history shouldn't shake them. Things like these should not make you weak. Rather, you should come out stronger afterwards. Leaving the path of the Prophet and the prophets before him leads to the fall and, of course, going backwards. In qalabtum ala aqabikum. Aqab. Aqab is, going backwards. So you don't want to go backwards. You want to continue on, move forward, because that's what your prophet would have wanted from you as well. And while so many people, fled the scene after they heard that prophet may have been killed, the Muslims, the weak-hearted one, they left, they fled. Some even resorted to seeking immunity from Abu Sufyan, that yes, we were on the other side, but now the prophet is no longer alive, we want immunity from you, so because of the relations that we have and all those things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah says, the disbelief of the people does not harm Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَلَن يَضُرَّ اللَّهِ, that it will not harm Allah one bit. This zarar will not reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if all of these people turn their backs against him. Being steadfast in the path of haqq, it's the best method of practically thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is where you stand up and show that you're true in your belief, that you're not this is where the true face of a munafiq also comes into play. So Prophet was perfect in all aspects of his life. As this is also an Eisal-e-Sawab Majlis, I wanted to derive some practical lessons from the kalam of Rasulullah, which inshallah would be beneficial to all of us in order to run our lives, in order to mold our lives in the form that Prophet would have wanted us to live, so that we can learn from the chapter of Prophet's personal life, how he dealt with people, how he dealt with his family members. What did he say in reference to his family? What did he say in reference to, his relatives, his neighbors, or his companions? His overall dealing with people, whether Muslims or non-Muslims. What is it that Prophet have said? Today, if someone asks us that you are the follower of the religion of Islam, which was brought by noble Prophet Muhammad, peace and greetings, peace be upon him, that how do you look at his example? Can you tell us something about that this Prophet used to do that you follow in your lives? We can recite this ayat, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. Indeed, in the life of the Prophet, there's a complete uswa, which is a mode of living for you. You'll find a complete code of conduct in the life of the Prophet. We, unfortunately, in our lives, we waste a lot of time. And when we realize it, it's too late. Prophet was so disciplined, as we find in the, if you read the books of Sirat, if you read the books of Ahadith, in all aspects of his life, there was this discipline that was found. From dressing up, he would always put on clean clothes. He would always apply perfume to himself. He would always look into the water to see his reflection, serving as a mirror to fix his hair, for example, before, as the custom was to put on your, turban, as everybody wore turbans back in the day. Unfortunately, in our societies, people think that the least attentive to himself is the most ascetic of all. सबसे बड़ा जाहिद वही है कि जो सबसे बुरा अपना ख्याल रखे. Prophet was always attractive. He was never repulsive. People didn't look at him and then they turned away saying, oh, I don't want to be in the company of such an individual. In the house, Prophet would dedicate one part of his portion of his life toward ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So much ibadat. Even that portion which he was dedicating, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to reveal ayat saying, Ya ayyuhal muzzammil, qum al-layl illa qalila. Oh, the one who has the cloak around him, wrapped around in a cloak. Stand up at night, but qalil, little bit, not too much. We don't want you to be overburdening yourself. So one part was dedicated toward his ibadah. The other part was for his family members. There weren't so many distractions, of course, back then, but there were other things at that time which would occupy human beings. Today, of course, things that occupy us is TV, internet, our devices, games, and all of those things. They have occupied us. They take a chunk of our life. Prophet had dedicated that time toward his family, because then he had to dedicate a time toward his community as well. That part where he would see people will come. Whenever they have a problem, They would come and ask for the solutions of their problems. So much so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to reveal an ayat, because a lot of people would come not respecting the time of the Prophet. And Prophet would not, show any sort of annoyance and disgust that he's not liking the company of someone who is just sitting there. You came, you asked a question, now get up and leave. Not just sitting in the house of the Prophet. So Prophet, would not show any little bit of annoyance or get angry that, why are you still here? Go. Until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed an ayat saying that if you want to speak to Prophet, then make sure that you pay him before you speak to him. You want consultation? You're here on an official visit? You have any sort of family issues? You come and you speak to Prophet, make sure you pay him first. And then right away, of course, people were not able to afford paying the Prophet. That silsila stopped. People stopped coming. Right away, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the next ayat in that chapter saying that it was difficult for you to do this. So we removed that command from you. But there was a point which was being established over here, that don't just come, because his time is valuable. Qimti. Don't squander your time, waste your time, nor waste the time of Rasulullah. So the three aspects of his life: one with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while worshipping, one with his family by spending quality time, and one with his community by solving their issues. This third one has, many other aspects of it that he actually looked forward to it. His daughter, Janab Fatimatu Zahra, salamullahi alayha, as well, that whenever, and there are some instances that when people would come, women would come and ask their questions from Janab Sayyidah. And a lady came, she asked her question one after another. And there was a list of long questions. Of course, it wasn't like today, phone call away or text or email and respond. No, it would take time. So people would travel all this distance. So then they would want to get all of their questions answered. When this lady who was continuously asking these questions, she was also feeling ashamed. She said, I'm sorry, my mother sent me with all of these questions and I know it's too much. Janab Sayyidah responded by saying, why are you decreasing my thawab? That for every question that I answer, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants me a house in paradise. That's how important it is. So Prophet would do the same thing. He said, Ablighuni hajata man la yaqdiru ala iblaghi hajatihi. فَإِنَّهُ مَنْ أَبْلَغَ سُلْطَانًا حَاجَةً مَنْ لَا يَقْدِرُ عَلَى إِبْلَاغِهَا ثَبَّتَ اللَّهُ قَدَمَيْهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. Convey the needs of those whose needs don't reach me. Some people may not be able to come to me. Some people will not be able to get their plea to me. Whoever conveys the needs of people to the leader, Allah will keep that person steadfast on the day of judgment. So if someone comes up to you and tells you, but that person himself is unable to come, then you serve as that, medium in between. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will keep your feet steadfast when all the other feet will be trembling. So this aspect is lacking from those in authority. They must not let any gap between them and others. Listen to the problems of the people. One of the best of the actions is removing doubts between two people or reconciling between two people. Ayat of Quran is also addressing that. And one of the biggest acts is to remove any sort of confusion between two people because of misunderstanding that they may have. They may not have understood each other, and now they're at odds. The best of the actions is Islah Dhatul Bain, to remove this discomfort and to go ahead and reconcile. Prophets, he was sent as what? وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. So he was a rahmat. Prophet was not after taking the revenge from anyone. Rather, he would care for Muslims and non-Muslims alike. So his rahmat would exceed beyond even those who were followers of the religion. So how do you behave under the light of the kalam of Rasulullah? How do you behave with other people? Prophet said, mu'min or mu'mineen rather, are like this building, this imarat. which has different ajza, different portions, different elements to it. Each one of these elements protect one another. So mu'mineen should also be the same way. And if a person comes and tells you about your defects, consider that person to be your best friend, not the one who's criticizing you. In fact, if a person pays attention to their own defects, instead of looking at the defects of other individuals, on the other hand, that is amongst the best of the actions. And then Prophet said, mu'mineen, when it comes to one another, they're kind of like a body which has different parts, different organs. The head, the external organs, the internal organs. And if one of these organs is hurting, the other organ understands and feels the pain of it. So we shouldn't be the way in the fabric of our society, the mu'mineen who are so closely living with one another, such a close bond amongst ourselves. And with the technology that we're all in touch, even in this pandemic, still we're aware of people who are in need. So we should be ready to take care of them according to the kalam of Rasulullah. So therefore, how do you behave with your parents? In reference to that, Prophet has said a lot of things. Of course, in this 35 minutes, 40-minute lecture, I will not be able to do justice if I just spoke about this portion of Prophet's kalam and his irshadat. It would take the entire majlis. But just one thing. Prophet says, Thalathun lam yaj'alillahu fihinna rukhsa. There are three for which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not given any leniency. Ada'ul amana ilal barri wal fajr. That giving the rights and the amanat and the trust back to those who are righteous and even those who are fajr. So if someone amongst the fasiqeen and fujjar entrusted you with something, you still have to return their trust. You can't just usurp their trust. Even if they are fajr or fasiq, disbeliever, mushrikeen, polytheist, doesn't matter. That's the trust that you have from them. That's what Prophet was known as what? Amin and Sadiq. This is prior to him announcing his risalat. So that's one thing. There's no rukhsat that you're given leniency that you don't have to pay if a person, for example, is fasiq or fajr. No such thing. It says, wal wafa'u bil ahdi lil barri wal fajr. And then when you make a covenant, make sure that you fulfill this covenant. Wafa bil ahd, which is one of the signs. Whether it comes to a person who's righteous, bar, or when it comes to a person who's fajr. To both, if you have made some sort of covenant, make sure that you fulfill your covenant. How easily it is that we break our covenants. We've made promises, we don't live up to those promises. Of course, when there's a genuine reason, that's one thing. In these first two things, ada'ul amanat and wafa bil ahd, we have same with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Prophet here is saying when it comes to ada'ul amanat and wafa bil ahd, even when a person is openly committing sins, fajr, fasiq, you still have to fulfill this ada'ul amana and wafa bil ahd. This ada'ul amana, paying the dues, and wafa bil ahd, keeping up with the covenant. Have you not made these covenants with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And then how we breach this contract that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this mithaq that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I touched upon it on Tuesday night in the Dua Tawassul program, and I spoke about it briefly. And the third thing, Prophet says, وَبِرُّ الْوَالِدَيْنِ بَرَّيْنِ كَانَ أَوْ فَاجِرَيْنِ. And make sure that you are what? You're virtuous, you're righteous, you show kindness toward your walidain, barrain kana aw fajran. Whether them, your parents, father or mother, whether they themselves are righteous or they themselves are fasiq and fajr. These three things, Rasulullah says, Thalathun lam yaj'alillahu fihinna rukhsa. Allah did not leave any leniency when it comes to these three things in reference to these three. So when it comes to parents, whether they're fasiq or fajr, or whether mu'min and Muslim, doesn't matter. You have to still do what? Show kindness to them and deal with them in a noble way. And that's why a lot of us, who, mashallah, your parents are still alive and you're still able to serve them. It's a, favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to you. But those who aren't, those who have lost their family members, just as this is the Eisal-e-Sawab Majlis for this Marhuma, we find that those will say, well, how do we get that opportunity now? Prophet said, Sayyidul Abrar, man barra walidayh ba'da fawtihima. He said, Sayyidul Abrar, the master of those who are righteous, is the one who is kind to their parents even after their wafat. So it's not like the door is closed for you once they leave this world. As this marhuma is no longer with us, it does not mean that the door of rahmat to serve them is closed. There are still many ways that you can serve them. When it came to women, how Prophet spoke and how highly did he speak about them. He said, khayrukum li nisa'ihi wa ana khayrukum li nisa'i. Best amongst you is the one who's best in their behavior with their women. And I am the best when it comes to being best with their women. And then in similar hadith also mentions khayrukum li ahlihi wa ana khayrukum li ahli. The best is the one who's best with their khair. The appropriate or the khair is the best amongst you is those who are, dealing with their women or the family members in the best manner. He said, and I am the best amongst you because I take care of my family the best way possible. I take care of the women in my house the best way possible, whether these women are in the form of your mothers, in the form of your sisters, in the form of your spouses, in the form of your wives, in the form of your daughters, whatever the relationship may be. And then he says, when he said le ahlihi, as far as your family is concerned, that just encompasses all of the people. So much emphasis is placed upon how, and then Prophet goes to another extent when he adds, he says, ma akraman nisa illa karimun wala ahanahunna illa la'imun. That when it comes to showing kindness towards the women, he said, the best is the one who's noble is the one who shows nobility towards them. But the one who disgraces them, disrespects them, except who? Illa la'im, which is the opposite of kareem. The one who himself is disgraced is the one who disgraces them. And so much other. And then we look at the Muslim society today, how women are treated, how children are treated, how family members are treated in our own communities. We don't have to look too far away. How so many strange requests and cases come to us when it comes to the families. This is where, when it comes to even parents, you can't even imagine the extent to which Prophet went when it came to speaking highly of the parents. He said, وَالنَّظَرُ إِلَى الْوَالِدَيْنِ بِرَعْفَةٍ وَرَحْمَةٍ إِبَادَةٍ. The fact that you look up to them with rahmat, with mercy, with love is what? Ibadat itself. You've heard the hadith, النظر إلى وجه علي ibn Abi Talib ibadat, looking up to the face of Ali ibn Abi Talib is ibadat. Yes. And then he says also the looking at the face of your parents, just looking at it with rahmat, with mercy, with respect, with integrity, with honor, that is considered to be ibadat. How easy is this religion? In the month of Ramadan, أنفاسكم فيه عبادة, نومكم فيه عبادة, أنفاسكم فيه tasbih. That your breath that you take is tasbih, glorification of Allah. Your sleeping is considered to be ibadat. And then just looking at your parents is considered to be ibadat. It says, ما ولد بار نظر إلى أبويه برحمة قال Rasulullah. Prophet said this, that there's not a child who's bar, coming from the word bar again, righteous, nazara ila abawayhi, who looks at his parents. Abaway includes father and mother. Birahmatin, with rahmat, with mercy, a glance of respect and mercy. إِلَّا كَانَ لَهُ بِكُلِّ نَظْرَةٍ حِجَّةٌ مَبْرُورَةٌ. Except for every glance that he takes upon his parents, out of respect and rahmat, there's what for them? For each glance, there's hijjatun mabrura. Hajj, which is accepted in the bargah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hajj, which is already written down in your records, for example. And then again, as I said, this requires an entire majlis, what Prophet has said when it comes to your family, when it comes to your relatives, when it comes to your women in your house, and when it comes to your parents. But there are other things that I wanted to get out of, as far as the Seerah of Rasulullah is concerned. Another important message that we derive from the life of the Prophet is that if we don't stop corruption in the society, we will all drown in it together. Yes. Imagine if you're traveling on a big ship, on a boat, across the ocean, and there are a lot of people on this boat with you. And then one person goes in the corner and starts digging a hole in it. You know that if a person is successful in digging a hole in it, this will let the water in. And when the water comes in, of course, it will drown the ship. If nobody stops this person, you would say that's strange. Do these people not care about the consequences if this person is successful in doing what he's doing? Everyone on board will drown as well. The ills of the society are also similar as this example. For example, when a person causes corruption in the land and another person sees and says what? Person sees that this person is doing something wrong and fails to do nahi anil munkar. He says, it's none of my business. Another person looks at this person committing corruption in the land and he says, oh, we wouldn't be going to the same grave. I know this slang does not work well in English. Meaning that the accountability will be separate for me and this person. We're not going in the same grave. We're going to be separate. These people don't realize that our society is like that ship, is like that boat. That if one person is trying to damage this boat, it will cause all of us to drown. Similarly, if corruption enters from any of these ends, then all of us will drown in it together. So that's as far as our duty toward this very important wajib, which is nahi anil munkar, from the kalam of Rasulullah. Equality of mankind. How much has Prophet spoken about when it comes to, in general, people, Muslims, non-Muslims alike? Yes, we may not agree with what they're doing, what they follow, but that's fine. The concept of equality that Prophet is mentioning in that society, which society? That's lacking social norms. Prophet said what? He said, An-nasu sawa'un ka asnan al-misht. All the people are equal, like the teeth of a comb. Have you ever held a comb? You brush your, comb your hair. You look at all of the teeth. Usually, they're all the same. In fact, this is one of the creations which predates back to 5,000 years, that the comb existed, up to 5,000 years ago. So in the time of Rasulullah, of course, there were combs. And so he's giving this example. An-nasu sawa'un ka asnan al-misht. They're all equal, just like the teeth of the comb. How they're equal, and there's not one big or one small. They're all equal, because if they're not equal, then you will not be able to run them through your hair. Imagine in the society where Prophet is speaking these words. At the time of Hajjatul Wada, when Prophet was coming back to Medina, that khutbah, which is also regarded as khutbah Ghadir, where Prophet announced the wilayat of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi. Before all that, Prophet addressed people in this way. He said, Ayyuhan nas, inna rabbakum wahidun, wa inna aba'akum wahidun. Kullukum li Adama, wa Adamu min turab, inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. وَلَيْسَ لِعَرَبِيٍّ عَلَى أَجَمِيٍّ فَضْلٌ إِلَّا بِالتَّقْوَى. وَلَيْسَ لِعَرَبِيٍّ عَلَى أَجَمِيٍّ فَضْلٌ إِلَّا بِالتَّقْوَى. He said, oh people, إِنَّ رَبَّكُمْ وَاحِدٌ. Your Lord is one. All of us, our Lord is one. There's one Allah. وَأَبَاكُمْ وَاحِدٌ. And our Father is one. Hazrat Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. كُلُّكُمْ لِآدَمْ. All of you are from Hazrat Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. وَآدَمُ مِن تُرَابٍ. And Hazrat Adam was created from the soil, from the clay, from the land, from khak. And Allah says in Quran, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The best amongst you is the one who's noble as far as their taqwa is concerned, as far as their piety is concerned. And that there's no superiority of an Arab over Ajam and vice versa, except bit taqwa. Except, of course, if a person is more when it comes to their taqwa. So therefore, no one has the right to show superiority over others based on their lineage, their family, their background, their generation, their race, their ethnicity, let alone their status in the community. We're all created from the same soil, and being created with the soil, by no stretch of imagination should we be taking any pride in who we are. Only, and the one which is allowed to take any sort of pride, which is in the spiritual and immaterial form, because of the spiritual and the immaterial features. Because when it comes to the worldly affairs, not everybody will be able to attain that nobility, if you want to call it, in the eyes of the world. They will not all be able to do so because there will be classes. But when it comes to your spirituality, every single person has the ability to reach the highest of the ranks. So therefore, if there is any concept of taqwa, because you can only be judged if you are given all equal amount. If everybody is not given the equal amount, then you can't really judge them to what heights they go to. But there's one thing that we're all given in the same amount, that is our insaniyat, humanity. We're all humans in that way. And therefore, the spiritual aspect of ours and the immaterial aspect of ours, those features can all grow. So therefore, that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said the only criteria for any sort of superiority is with taqwa. When it comes to, this is where it comes to duties towards other Muslims or other human beings, non-Muslims, for example. Well, when it comes to duties towards Muslim, it gets even more strict. Prophet on numerous occasions reminded Muslims not to cause disunity and discord amongst themselves and be protectors of one another. He said, Al-Muslimu man salim al-Muslimuna min lisanihi wa yadihi. Muslim in its true meaning is someone, man salim al-Muslimuna, from whose hand, lisanihi, from whose tongue, wa yadihi, from his hands, other Muslims are what? Safe and sound. Muslim is someone whose tongue and hands, does not harm other Muslims. In fact, other people feel what? Safe and protected by it. Prophet, when standing up for mankind. And this is the epitome of justice in the kalam of Rasulullah. He said, Lan tuqaddasa ummatun la yukhadhu lil-da'if fiha haqquhu min al-qawiyyi ghayra muta'ta'in. Beautiful words. He said, no nation, just let this sink in for a second. He said, no nation can reach the highest grandeur, taqaddus, dignity, whatever you want to translate that as. No nation can reach the highest of the taqaddus unless the weak and the poor in the society are able to ask for their rights from the rich and the strong. Sometimes we question the Western societies and how they're successful because of this fact, maybe, that where the poor and those who are weak might be even given the same ability or to be able to question those who are rich and powerful. That is just the epitome of when it comes to justice. If that is applicable, and then you see lack of it all over the Muslim world. So what is the practical behavior? And what are the consequences of this practical behavior? And how do we learn that from the Prophet? On a trip with his companions one day, Prophet decided to camp somewhere overnight. When companions began cooking, one person took the duty of, catching the animal or slaughtering the animal. The other one is skinning it. The other one, for example, cutting the meat. The other one cooking it. Prophet asked them to gather wood, and so that they could build a fire. They started looking for it. Prophet then also started looking. They requested Prophet to sit down, rest. We'll do all the work. As how would be the case when we have, and of course, no comparison whatsoever. If ulama and the scholars are amongst the people, you say, Maulana, you sit down. We will do it. We will take care of all of these things. Prophet said what? These people told Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, nahnu nakfika. We're enough. There are enough people. We'll take care of all of this. Faqala, alimtu annakum takfuni. I know that you will be able to take care of all these things. Walakin akrahu an atamayyaza alaykum. But it is a matter of kirahat for me that I sit here all by myself and you do all the work. And I feel like that I have been given some sort of distinction, which he was given a distinction. Atamayyaza alaykum fa inna Allah yukrahu man min abdihi an yarahu mutamayyizan bayna ashabihi. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like to see amongst his servants someone who's shown as given distinction. وَقَامَ فَجَمَعَ الْحَطَبَ. And then Prophet got up and he started looking for the wood himself. Even in the battle of Khandaq, he took part digging the trenches. In fact, in the seerah it is mentioned that there was this, when they were digging the trenches, they ran into this rock, which they were not able to break. Nobody was able to break it. You know who they called? They called Prophet. Only when Prophet came, he was able to break that rock. And so they could continue digging. In today's society, instead of relying, on others to do anything, we should be relying on ourselves. We don't need to go ahead and ask people for this or for that. Of course, if there's something that you can do yourself, then you should ask them. Nothing wrong with that, asking other people. But you should always try to do that if it is your duty, if it's your job, and not run away from that. I'll come towards conclusion. I know I've taken a lot of time. He is the best mode of morality. That's what Prophet is. We've heard this kalam of Rasulullah numerous times, and it never gets old. إِنَّمَا بُعِثُّ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. إِنَّمَا بُعِثُّ. In fact, by saying innama, there's nothing else that he was sent to do except for this purpose. The only purpose for him to be sent as a messenger. إِنَّمَا بُعِثُّ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I was sent only to perfect the noble ethics. Again, one of the travels with the companions, Prophet, there were a lot of travels due to war and whatnot. They stopped at one place to spend the night. They all got off. They did their wudu. Prophet got off from his camel. He walked in the direction where he could go ahead and do wudu. And then he came back toward his camel. People thought that Prophet does not want to stay here. Maybe he changed his direction. He said, let's go somewhere else. But Prophet came back, took the rope out of the bag to tie his camel. People said, come back. And said, oh, Prophet, why did you have to come back? You could have just called from there. Oh, Fulani, go ahead and tie my camel. I forgot to tie my camel. And we would have gladly done this. It's such a small act. In fact, we would have taken pride had you given us this honor. Prophet responded by saying, La yasta'in ahadukum min ghayrihi walau biqudmatin min siwak. Don't take help from anyone as much as possible, even to the extent of asking someone for toothbrush, miswak. Back in the day, of course, people were carrying their own miswak. Do what you can do yourself. See, the Prophet is not saying don't seek help from others where you cannot do something yourself. No, get help. Of course, this is how the society will prosper, by helping one another. That is a place where you do seek help. But at the same time, he's also saying the best of you who are those who are beneficial to others. So go ahead and help other people out. But at times when things that you can do yourself, don't become a burden from them, for others. Don't become a burden for other people. And then again, this is just the seerah of Rasulullah in this 35-40 minutes that I was able to bring. Of course, there's so many other things that we can address. The last days of the life of Rasulullah. When you look at the 23 years of his life, he goes through many hurdles. but he establishes this strong bond with his companions. Which leader does this? In the last passing days of his life, usually people are doing the takreem and ikram and congratulations and speaking about the good that people have done. But Prophet was the kind of person who, in those last moments of his life, when he was passing away, he said to them, what kind of prophet was I for you? Everyone, of course, responded positively. This was the same question the Prophet had asked even from the kuffar when they were waging war against him. That, they all said, yes, you were righteous, you were sadiq, you were amin. He asked the same question to his companions at the time of his death. Of course, he asked for other things which were not fulfilled. But one of the things he said, what kind of prophet was I for you? Everyone said, positively, you were the best. They all nodded in affirmative way. Prophet said, in these years, if I had any haqq upon my neck for you, ask me so that I can pay off right now. This sort of akhlaq that Prophet is teaching us, that when you're leaving this world, make sure that you ask that if there's any debt or any haqq that I may have on my neck for you, and I'll pay off right now, because I don't want to go with this heavy thing hanging on my neck. When Prophet left this world, he was not in debt to anyone. In fact, it would not be an understatement if I said the whole and entire Arabia was in debt to Rasulullah. His wasiyat was what? He said, Inni tarikum fikum mustaqalan. Today is, 28th of Safar, or the night of 28th of Safar. We should be paying the dues to Prophet by acting on his sirat. This would be the best way of satisfying him. And of course, what he said in reference to his Ahl Bayt and his family. That which guarantees prosperity, guarantees salvation for everyone. Amir al-Mu'mineen said, Ahabbul ibad ilallahi al-muta'assi bi sunnati nabiyyi. The best of the people in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are those who do what? Ta'assi, follow the path and the footsteps of Rasulullah. Indeed, this day, the 28th of Safar, only 2.5 months after that Hajjatul Wada, that Ailan at Ghadir Khum, where Prophet actually had predicted and announced that he will no longer be with us. And people started weeping, started crying. There's a whole debate. Maybe at another time, at another place, I will address the Wafat of the Prophet or the Shahadat of the Prophet. Many of our scholars, Ahl Sunnat, and of course, as well as our own Ahl Tashayyu, believe that Prophet was martyred. It was a Shahadat of the Prophet, that he was poisoned. Either Masumin were killed in battlefield by sword, or they were poisoned. None of them lived their natural life. But as I recited this ayat, Afa in mata aw qutila in qalabtum ala aqabikum. No, there remains the wali of Rasulullah amongst you. And even today, there's the hujjat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is amongst us. Prophet served his people for 23 years. He suffered so much that while he was propagating those 3 years in Shi'bi Abi Talib, when they were resorting to eating even the leaves of the tree, that's how the Quraysh had boycotted Rasulullah. His daughter also suffered after the wafat of Rasulullah on the 28th day after Safar. It is mentioned the Shahadat of Janab Fatmatul Zahra, which is either 75 days after the wafat of Rasulullah or 95 days. That beloved daughter of Rasulullah, for whom Prophet would stand up from his place. The entire universe stands up for Rasulullah. All of the Anbiya will stand up for Rasulullah. And if there's one person that Prophet stands up for, is his daughter. But how did she leave this world? Sixth Imam says, she matat shahida. She was shahida. She left this world in the state that she was martyred. So therefore, the calamity that fell upon Janab Fatmatul Zahra. We see that these calamities are huge and humongous. What happened to Rasulullah and what happened to Janab Fatmatul Zahra salamullah alayha. But if you were to tell them both that how you will die and how your son Imam Hussein will leave this world, Just like Imam Hassan said, La yawmaka yawmika ya Aba Abdullah. There's no day like your day, O Aba Abdullah. Yes, our musibat is great, but the musibat of Aba Abdullah is greatest of the musibah. How great is this musibah? The Sayyid al-Shuhada his body lays in the plains of Karbala for 3 days, and his own son Imam Zain al-Abidin, who's near him, who's in the tent near him, but unable to come out to go ahead and bury the body of his father. Ajrukum Allah, may Allah give you no grief and sorrow. Not only that Imam Zain al-Abidin could not perform the last rituals on the body of his father, but also Imam Zain al-Abidin Eisal-e-Sawab could not prevent the trampling of the bodies of Imam Hussein and the bodies of his companions and his family members. Ala la'natullah al-qawmi al-zalimin wa sayalamu alladhina zalamu ayya munqalibin yanqalibun inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our ibadah tonight. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq to be able to follow the commands and the teachings of Masumin alayhi salatu wassalam. We ask all of you to please recite a Surah Fatiha for Marhuma, Razia, Razak, as well as all of your Marhumin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rabbil Alamin ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta alaihim ghayril maghdubi alaihim waladdallin. Nazar aaya hasan yaad ashqa se nazar aaya hasan yaad Ashaka sim ka nazar aaya hasan yaad aaye Ashaka sim ka nazar aaya hasan yaad aaye Is khadi ho bahut is khadi ho bahut shekho hasan yaad aaye Ashaka sim ka nazar aaya hasan yaad aaye Ashaka sim ka nazar aaya hasan yaad aaye Is khadi ho bahut is khadi ho bahut shekho hasan yaad aaye Ashaka sim ka nazar aaya 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 hasan yaad aaye Mehndi armaanon ki haathon mein laga kar maane Mehndi armaanon ki haathon mein laga kar maane Sera maathe sera maathe saja ya to hasan yaad aaye Ashaka sim ka nazar aaya 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 hasan yaad aaye टुकड़े बदन के होते आए कासे तेरे टुकड़े बदन के होते वो के सीने से है वो के सीने से लगा या तो हसन जाना है आशा से का नजर आया हसन याद आए आशा से का नजर आया हसन याद आए आशा से का नजर आया हसन याद आए
حسن یاد آئے لاشا قاسم کا نظر آیا حسن یاد آئے قاسم کے چنے اور ابا کے ڈالے ٹکڑے قاسم کے چنے اور ابا کے ڈالے مانگ کر حسن یاد آئے لاشا قاسم کا نظر آیا 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 حسن یاد آئے شبیر جو قاسم کا جنازہ آئے شبیر جو قاسم کا جنازہ آئے سب تیروں کے ہے سب تیروں کے جنازے سے حسن یاد آئے لاشا قاسم کا نظر آیا حسن یاد آئے اس گھڑی کو بہت اس گھڑی کو بہت شیخ و حسن یاد آئے لاشا قاسم کا نظر آیا حسن یاد آئے لاشا
متوجہ زیارت. السلام علیکم یا رسول اللہ، السلام علیکم نبی اللہ، السلام علیکم یا حبیب اللہ، السلام علیکم یا خیرت اللہ، السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ. السلام علیکم یا وارث آدم صفوت اللہ، السلام علیکم یا وارث نوح نبی اللہ، السلام علیکم یا وارث ابراہیم خلیل اللہ، السلام علیکم یا وارث موسیٰ کلیم اللہ، السلام علیکم یا وارث عیسیٰ روح اللہ، السلام علیکم یا وارث محمد حبیب اللہ، السلام علیکم یا وارث امیر المؤمنین ولی اللہ، السلام علیکم ابن محمد المصطفى، السلام علیکم ابن علی المرتضى، السلام علیکم ابن فاطمة الزہراء، السلام علیکم ابن خدیجة الکبریٰ، السلام علیکم یا ثار اللہ وابن ثارہ والوتر الموتور، اشہد انک قد اقمت الصلاة وآتیت الزکاة وامرت بالمعروف ونہیت عن المنکر وطاعت اللہ ورسولہ حتی اتاک الیقین، فلعن اللہ امتا قتلتک ولعن اللہ امتا ظلمتک ولعن اللہ امتا سمعت بذلك فرضیت به، یا مولاي یا ابا عبداللہ اشہد انک کنت نورا فی الاسلاب الشامخة والارحام المطہرة لم تنجسك الجاہلیت بانجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها، واشهد انك من دعائم الدين واركان المؤمنين، واشهد انك الامام البر التقي الرضي الزكي الهادي المهدي، واشهد ان الائمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وعالم الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على اهل الدنيا، واشهد الله وملائكته وانبياءه ورسله اني بكم مؤمن وبيا بكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع، صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. زیادہ حضرت علی پر. السلام علیکم ابن رسول اللہ، السلام علیکم ابن نبی اللہ، السلام علیکم ابن امیر المؤمنین، السلام علیکم ابن الحسین الشہید، السلام علیکم ایہا الشہید، السلام علیکم ایہا المظلوم وابن المظلوم، لعن اللہ امتا قتلتک ولعن اللہ امتا ظلمتک، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. زيارة الشهداء كربلاء. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباءه. السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله وأوداءه. السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الناصح. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله. بأبي أنتم وعمي طبتم وطابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما. فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. زيارة حضرت عباس. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوصيين. السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلاما وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأحوتهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواسي. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدافع عن أخيه المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب فيما زهد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل. والحقق الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء. السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء. السلام عليك يا شمس الشموس وعنيس النفوس أيها المدفون بأرض توس علي بن موسى رضا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب الأسر والزمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك وجعلنا من أعوانك وانصارك ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Just a reminder, inshallah, this coming weekend or tomorrow and Saturday, we will have the 2 majalis in this series in which we will be commemorating the shahadat of our second Imam, Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salatu wassalam tomorrow, and Saturday night, the shahadat of Imam Ali ibn Musa Rada alayhi salatu wassalam, which is also towards the end of month of Safar. Both of these majalis will be recited in Urdu by Maulana Syed Safi Haider Sahab from India. Both of these majalis will begin sharp at 8 p.m. and they both will be online. Thank you very much for tuning in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.